Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Human Reaction Podcast, your weekly source for independent commentary on cultural news and politics, where it's always my pleasure to sit across from these gentlemen and talk about a bunch of interesting topics. Today, we've got David at Usual Suspect and Bennett filling in for our wayward Canadian, Kyle. We would like to wish Kyle a very happy Canadian Thanksgiving. Did we ever confirm?
I never looked it up.
It may or may not be Canadian Thanksgiving.
I'm almost positive it is. It might be next weekend. But
either way, Kyle, this one's for you. We miss you. Hope you're doing well out there. Guys, we have a very big show for you today. David, what are we going to be talking about?
Kamala Harris secured the ho vote.
She didn't have it before?
Well, she definitely has it now, and the gay vote probably. A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Second, court ruled that fluoride could pose an unreasonable risk to children's IQ. Communists world over tremble in fear.
slow burn.
The tunnels below Disneyland flood. Human traffickers are in full retreat.
Oh, God.
Oh, Jesus.
David,
that was bad.
David.
All right. Second hurricane in 2 weeks strikes the East Coast. The internet sees something fishy, and we're going to be digging into it.
Absolutely,
we will. Interesting. The Danes drop new Nordstream revelations. No, I'm not letting it go. We're going to let this thing cook. We're going to be covering this in 2026. I swear to God.
I love it.
And Michael Schellenberger is not just the greatest journalist of the 21st century. He's also an alien.
What?
Yeah, he dropped his program, the new program revelation from his Substack. So we know that now. We're also going to get an update. I'm going to update a little bit on Arrow. What happened with that? We covered it a bunch last year, so I want to bring everything back up to speed on where we're at on UAPs and with this new revelation of a secret program that he got access to.
Wow.
Very interesting. And in the skiff, by popular request, we're talking about the CIA Project MK Ultra.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
So
go ahead, Bennett.
Canadian Thanksgiving is this coming Monday, so yes, this is the weekend of Canadian
Happy Canadian Thanksgiving. All right.
If you are a small business owner looking for exponential growth, you have to connect with Adam Thune at Intellectual Patriots. He will revolutionize your business game and help you get to the next level. Adam can streamline your business practices and advertising strategies to improve your bottom line. His expertise in data engineering means he can build you the systems you need to collect and analyze market data. His mission is to provide you with invaluable insights to fuel your success. From grant writing and business proposals to digital systems integrations, even AI management. Intellectual Patriots is a one-stop shop for cutting-edge solutions. Don't wait another second. Visit intelpatriots.com to learn more. That's INTEL Patriots.com.
This episode is brought to you by Revved Up Promo, the official apparel partner of Human Reaction. Revved Up is a premier full-service shop specializing in laser engraving, screen printing, and embroidery. Not only are they now making all of our apparel right down the road from us, they can do the same for your brand and ship it to you anywhere in the world. Revved Up helps you navigate the extensive universe of merch options and uses state-of-the-art techniques to showcase your brand in its very best light. So if you want to support our show and our generous sponsor, you can now do so by buying our merch and by turning to Revved Up Promo for your own custom apparel needs. Reach them at revveduppromo.com. That's with 2 V's and 2 P's, or just check the show notes for a link. Before we get started, please do like, follow, and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Please smash that like button. Definitely follow us if you're new to the show. We do one of these every week. We got some really exciting things coming soon. Thank you so much to our members who support us. If you would like to become a member and get access to the Skiff, which David was talking about, our members only show, go to humanreactionpod.com, find out all the ways you can support us, either through YouTube, through Substack. We also have some cool merch up there as well. Let's go ahead and check out the meme of the week, which I have to say I'm proud of. I unbeknownst to me, Adam, our beloved Dr. A in the Discord, brought this one as well, but I'm going to take credit today, Adam, for this one. Okay, so it's for those of you just listening, on top frame here, we've got a picture of Israel. We've got, missiles flying from two sides, my tax dollars and somehow also my tax dollars flying at each other. And then below that, a picture of the devastation from Hurricane Helene, somehow none of my tax dollars.
Oh, man.
Which is sad but true.
Yeah. Sad but true.
Sad but true. A lot of question marks around the failed response from FEMA over all this stuff, and of course they're fighting back. But honestly, I've been really encouraged to see all the regular everyday people who are taking matters into their own hands, donating to individuals who are running trucks
and flying helicopters into these, stricken areas that are completely cut off from civilization to help, alleviate the suffering that's going on. And we still don't know how many people have been killed by Helene. Even in the midst of this next hurricane, which is sort of sweeping Helene out of the news cycle, like it's still a huge issue. So I would encourage anybody, if you know anyone in the region, reach out to them and find out a way to help. That's the best thing that we can do right now. And I wouldn't necessarily say that giving money to an organization like the Red Cross or something like that would necessarily be the right way to go, because we just don't know kind of where that money's going, if it's being effective or not. So definitely reach out to the people you know in that area.
All right, so we have Call Her Daddy, hosted Kamala Harris, and here's a little clip.
Kamala Harris, I wanted to have you here today to talk about your positions, not only in politics, but also in the bedroom.
Oh my God, thank you, Alex. I'm so happy to be here. I love Call Her Daddy. Do you know what the strongest weapon a woman has in this world?
The Gluck 9000.
Their voice.
People want to talk fracking. I want to talk
Let's let the daddy gang know. I relate to you. I deal with the same problems you deal with. We're all horny girl bosses, just trying to get to the top, being middle class.
Are you into bondage?
Oh my God, Alex, when I was a prosecutor, I put a lot of men in handcuffs.
Let's talk Donald Trump.
Let me be clear, Donald Trump is neither mindful nor demure nor brat. Okay, when I'm elected, I will be the first president to pee sitting down.
What about FDR?
What about FDR? What about FDR is so good? And her face at the end, the FDR.
Wow. Okay, so for those of us that aren't hip to this, Call Her
Kamala
Daddy
Harris.
is a very popular podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
She used to be Barstool, but she kind of broke away.
I see.
Yeah. And that skit is by Sienna Hubert Ross. Well, you can find her on X. Doesn't have much follow on X, but huge on Twitter. And for her impression of Kamala Harris.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, that was satire. That wasn't actually Kamala.
Yeah, for the audio listeners.
I tried to find a clip of the actual thing, and it was so cliche and boring and terrible. So I went with the funny joke instead.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing that.
Even the real thing is kind of a funny joke. So
Is it though?
You mean a woman president? Bennett? Jesus, man.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
She'll be the first president who pees sitting down.
What about FDR?
Oh, wow.
Well, it does show. I mean, and I do think at least one part, stepping back and looking at it, it is a signal of even the mainstream news candidate has to go to podcast now if they want to have any success in the election cycles. I think it's a win for alternative media. It's a win for a more diffused, less centralized media landscape.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, at the same time, Trump went on Flagrant podcast
Andrew
with that
Schultz.
comedian. Yeah. And was an excellent interview. Interesting. Actually got into some sense of policy point of view. I didn't really see that from the clips I looked at from the Call Her Daddy stuff. I did not have the time.
I thought about listening.
Watch the whole thing.
I might still, just to give her fair due, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did listen to Flagrant also. That was the thing with Trump is he's not putting on a show for you. That's just who he is. Where Kamala, I just can't everything she does feels so fake and forced. And yeah.
So in media, there's this. It's like a distribution graph, right? When you start doing public communications, it's very easy to go into a very specific mode and communicate in that mode, right? Especially if you're a trained media professional, they kind of teach you to talk in a certain way, to articulate in a certain way, and to engage so that it's suitable for the medium, which is like radio and television, right?
You're saying Kamala was trained to communicate this way?
I think every politician is. Yeah.
Who's doing her training?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
she did good in the debate.
And she's good at speeches and stuff like that because of that training, right?
There's a reason they kept her away from interviews.
As you go along, it comes across as fake, right? That's the thing about training, right? It doesn't come across as organic and natural and normal. Donald Trump has been doing this for such a long time, and he's such an entertainer. He looks authentic even as he's putting on a show. Right? That's the difference, right? It's just a difference in skill. It's a difference in capability to articulate and to be in the moment and to flow with the conversation to make it feel normal and natural. That happens the more you do it.
Yeah.
And Kamala just has been insulated. I mean, tremendously so by the mainstream media. So she doesn't really get hard questions. She was asked a hard question this week that she totally fumbled, which was, what would you do different than Biden? And she pretty much said, I'm
Nothing.
physically not Biden. And I'm physically not Donald Trump. And that's all I have to offer. Like, pretty much is what she said.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
classic.
Well, and she was also on that NBC, I believe it was an NBC interview, which they got into some hot water over doctoring because I don't know if you guys saw the side by side.
60 Minutes. So
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's CBS.
Yeah, 60 Minutes. Thank you. Where they basically totally changed her answer to this question to make it sound way more intelligent than the real one. And there is a real clip of what she did answer, and it was
that's
not coherent.
I mean, like working in news before, I had a lot of reservations if we ever like were altering stuff like that. Like I can't believe that they actually did it and aired it.
How often did that happen when you were working?
There was really one time where we did an interview, but for whatever reason, that we only had one camera. So we recorded the interview with it on the guest. I think it actually might have been like Pelosi or something. And then we shot the anchor after asking the questions.
Oh.
And even though like we didn't change anything, there was still like a lot, like I had a lot of reservations because I'm like, we could change things, and it just like, like, so I think that's a very iffy area to be altering things like that. Even though we were doing it with like obviously the best intentions and weren't changing any of her answers or anything, it's still like a gray area.
You could if you wanted to.
That's the thing. And I was like, I don't think we should air this just because we've clearly edited it in a way that didn't actually happen.
Well, that gives the audience an impression that was false, right? Which is that there was an interview going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was. It's just like, when you show the anchor, he's actually just talking to an empty chair.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
Yeah. So it's like, I think that's a very iffy area to be manipulating interviews, and especially if it's, I think legacy media is now pretty much showing that they lean left. So in my view, they are assisting her candidacy by trying to make her look better in that interview. So
totally.
I think you just have to be neutral, which I know is,
I mean, it's a good
seems
standard.
impossible.
It's a good standard to hold the press to, but they've completely abdicated that responsibility to be arbiters of truth of any sort. Yeah, at this point.
So a new truth drops this week with a court ruling that fluoride levels pose an unreasonable risk to children's IQ. We have a nice little breakdown here from NBC, I believe it was. Yeah, NBC News on this case.
Scrub, ready?
Abby Udi Smith is extra careful about brushing her son Teddy's teeth now that her local tap water no longer contains fluoride. After community members in Union County, North Carolina, came forward to express concerns, the county commission voted 3-2 to remove it.
I didn't even know that there was a fight against fluoride. Are you ready to come back?
She's now scrambling to figure out what to do next for her two small children.
We're going to have to talk about possibly supplementing.
Dentist Meg Lockery is alarmed. She says fluoride, a naturally occurring mineral, should be added to public water to help develop strong teeth, especially for small children and those without access to a dentist. Toothpaste with fluoride, she says, is not enough because the fluoride needs to be ingested.
We know that fluoride works. All the journal articles have shown that there's a 25% reduction in children and adult decay for people that are in community fluoridated water.
Despite being the norm for decades in local debates, the nationwide fight over fluoride in water is reaching new heights in the wake of COVID and the anti-vax movement, pitting dentists like Lockery
I hope you consider leaving the fluoride in the water for the most vulnerable of our population.
against activists.
How long can our society bear the cost of knowingly lowering our population's IQ?
In Union County, the debate erupted
when officials prepared to open a new water treatment plant. The local chair of the right-wing political group Moms for Liberty pointed to a controversial 2019 Canadian study that showed slightly lower IQ scores in children whose mothers had higher levels of fluoride exposure during pregnancy, though the study's author acknowledges more research is needed.
Fluoride is actually the one substance that we add to our water that's not meant to address the quality of the water.
County.
Yeah. Interesting, huh?
Very interesting. I mean, this debate's been raging on for years and years, and oftentimes, I mean, at least in my experience, it's been a very fringe topic. The people who are supporting taking fluoride out of the water are considered to be conspiracy theorists. But now, in the wake of recent research, and the NIH actually coming out and saying they admit that fluoride is not safe for small children in terms of like their neurological development, it's really shifted. Which is, I think, super positive. And I think that the real debate here is around, should you have the choice to drink water without fluoride and then apply fluoride in a secondary manner in your toothpaste or however you want to do it? Mm-hmm. In this case, no one has a choice in these communities where the city commission has just voted, yes, this is what we're going to do. You can't, I mean, you would have to buy extra filtration and stuff to take it out. So, is this the right way to go? Put fluoride in the water, or do you take it out and then maybe subsidize fluoride toothpaste for kids in less wealthy areas that maybe don't have access to dental care in the same way?
Since you're the dad here, what age are your kids' teeth generally falling out? Like, is it that necessary to?
Oh, you want to brush your kids' teeth right away?
No, yeah. I know, yeah. But it's not my question.
It's gonna fall out anyway. So
when are they getting their adult teeth generally?
Yeah, like what is it? I don't know. Fuck. No, he's in that age between 7 and 9 when they start falling out. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just wondering because they say the fluoride toothpaste isn't enough to help with stronger teeth, but I feel like by that time their teeth are falling out anyways. Obviously, you want healthy gums, you want all that, but is it that necessary? Is that a dumb question? I think
it's not a dumb question. Some of it is that fluoride needs to be ingested in order to do that. And you're not supposed to swallow your toothpaste, but kids do. Everyone knows that when they're brushing their teeth. In fact, that's like half the reason kids brush their teeth is just the taste of the toothpaste. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just a pain in the butt. The other side of that, I think ultimately what this comes down to is it's just the political question that arises when we have aggregate systems, right? So the aggregate system in this case is the public water supply, right? So that has to come down to a political issue. And the question is then, well, when there are trade-offs, we actually have to acknowledge the trade-offs. And for a long time, we've been refusing to acknowledge trade-offs. If fluoride has an association with lower IQ, but also has the benefit of better teeth, what do we do, right? If you have a centralized system of experts, the experts get to navigate the trade-off. They get to say, better teeth is more important than this other thing, and that makes sense. There's a reason for that. Why? Because IQ isn't measurable, but more doctor visits due to bad teeth is measurable. And if you have a socialized medical system, you have a great incentive to plan for poor people what their life should look like. And that is consumption by fluoride, even if they don't know about it or want it.
Absolutely. Well, and I think there's another piece to this too, which is very parallel to the allopathic, the traditional Western medicine approach that we take in the United States, which is fluoride is really just it's a Band-Aid for something that can be solved with better diet. If you're consuming less sugar, less processed grain, less things that promote cavity formation, you're not going to need this sort of intervention at all, right? And the other piece of this is that, fluoride is an industrial waste byproduct. And there's a tremendous amount of incentive for companies that have this product that they would otherwise have to dispose of figuring out a way to put it to work and to make money on it. And there's a pipeline for that.
Right. It's probably harder to sell fluoride to the public, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially if given the new information environment, they can find the trade-offs and then navigate them themselves. One of the tricks of that is there could be communities or people who need to supplement with fluoride if that's what they need, right?
Sure, but it should be a choice.
It should be a choice, yes. Right? And that's that vision of government question. When there's a trade-off, what is the just role? Now, where I cut it off there is where one of the city commissioners or county commissioners who voted to remove fluoride in that area, what he was saying is that there is, it's one of the things that are added that has nothing to do with safety, it has everything to do with a positive benefit. Therefore, it isn't the just role of government, right? Because they're saying it's not their job to navigate the trade-off for people. It's the individual's job to navigate trade-offs,
right?
Because that way you have voluntary consent, and you're not in the position of planning other people's lives for them, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
Classic issue.
I think we should send excess fluoride to the UK.
Ouch.
Only 1 in 10 in England currently have fluoride added to their drinking water.
Wow.
So that's why they have horrible teeth.
There might be some other factors involved.
All right. So we're going to dive into Hurricane Milton. And, this is a serious topic. It's a lot of people are in a rough way because of these 2 hurricanes that are happening right now. But I did want to start it off with a national treasure. Senator John Kennedy from the great state of Louisiana, commenting on
I was way off.
Commenting on the hurricane and kind of how people are navigating this in the public sphere.
Well, Vice President Harris and some members of the media are complaining that people are asking hard questions about the Biden-Harris recovery to Hurricane Helene. They say it's a new conspiracy theory. I'll concede that we need some new conspiracy theories, but it's because all the old ones turned out to be true. Conspiracy theories up something like 37-0. Here are the facts. Helene was a monster storm. We saw it coming. The federal government had time to prepare. It wasn't prepared. We don't have nearly enough soldiers and military helicopters rescuing people. During Katrina, we had 20,000 soldiers and 350 military helicopters. A week after the storm in Appalachia, we had, I think, 7,000 soldiers and maybe 100 helicopters. And you especially need helicopters in a mountainous area.
Yeah. So, and it's just one of those things, like when the government fails, there's going to be people who are searching for answers, especially on this scale. It's a massive, massive failure.
How dare you demand answers
in a
from your government?
Yeah, in a free society, that's
You're full of shit today.
That accountability is what we'd expect.
Yeah. Well, what's been really interesting, just to touch a little bit more on Helene, and forgive me if you guys covered this, but like I've been seeing videos of some of these citizen organized supply depots where people are bringing things and then distributing them to these communities get rotor washed by black helicopters coming down and kind of
I was going to ask about that too.
Flushing stuff out and causing chaos, and tents are going flying. Like, what's that all about?
I don't understand what's happening there. But if it was one video, I'd be like, well, this is just a pilot making a mistake, thinking he can land there and he can't, or whatever.
Yeah, but there are multiple videos.
So many. And it's funny because we talked about Helene, and I've had all these people sending me these videos since then. We didn't even mention the helicopters, but this is the thing that's happening. It's happening. It's happening on this weird scale where all these people are seeing a helicopter, you're like, oh, it's the helicopter thing again, taking out their phone and recording it as tents are flying through the air. Now, they keep saying it's destroying the things, and I'm like, well, I imagine it's inconvenient. I mean, it's a pain in the ass. I mean, there's lots of things, but I can't imagine
it's certainly not helping.
Yeah,
so
right. So what's
if you're
happening
there to help?
Well,
If you're
I don't
from,
know.
if,
It's one of the ones I've seen is the Chinook, which gives like a lot of power underneath it. So like it's got the 2 rotors.
Yep.
So like that, like that's the one I've seen where like stuff is legitimately going flying, and I think a few people actually got hurt from it because I think things are flying into them.
Yes.
So yeah, like I mean, I think it's a little bit more than just an inconvenience, basically.
Right, right.
I think it's actually destructive.
Any individual circumstance could be a range from inconvenience to actually destroying or hurting somebody, right? It could be anywhere in that spectrum. My point is just that I don't understand what's happening. I mean, helicopter pilots know what they're doing. The individual helicopter pilots aren't, like, I'm going to go screw these people up, ha, ha, ha. Like, they're freaking in a disaster zone trying to do their job, I assume. I mean, not assuming malice in that case. But it could be. It could be like these guys are screwing up our coordination. One of the things that Adam said last time is one of the challenges to reliefs in this area, especially National Guard coordinated reliefs, is that sometimes the private people who are there kind of get in the way because it's uncoordinated.
Right.
That's in part due to the government's incompetence in this area that people are trying to fill in the gaps.
Right.
So who's really at fault here?
Right. Well, and when you pair the helicopter, what's that?
Catch-22.
Oh, for sure. When you pair FEMA's failed response in so many ways with this clearly like official military government helicopter situation, it becomes way more suspicious that like, I don't know what their intent is. We can't assume their intent, but it's a very odd thing to pair together.
Totally.
And a lot of odd things with Milton happening as well, which as of the date of this recording just made landfall last night in Florida, caused a tremendous amount of damage.
Yeah, like the joke up front was about the new roof on the stadium. That's what it's referring to.
Yeah.
That's surprising that by this time it was category 1, correct?
No, I think it hit as a 3. I think that's what we found out.
Yes, correct. It hit the actual land as a 3, and then by the time it got across middle Florida, it was a 1.
Yeah.
Which is normal. I'm not saying that's abnormal, but that, what is the construction standard for that to keep something like this from happening?
That's a really good question. In a hurricane-prone area, you would think they would have some understanding of how to build to prevent that, but at a certain point you're looking at a very...
Rays are kind of like a poverty franchise, so
fair point.
Shots fired.
They got the
Dude,
money
these
for
people
it.
are suffering enough, okay?
I don't care about the baseball field, all right? the people who are actually losing like homes and stuff, like I care about you guys, but yeah.
Right. Well, and according to Zero Hedge, 3 million people without power right now, so it's a substantial amount of real challenge to real people on the ground.
Absolutely. And beside the winds, which I think were clocked at upwards of 160 to 180 miles an hour, the storm surge was really the major risk for people here. And we have a time-lapse video of a camera on what looks to be a road next to a beach, obviously coastal area. For those of you just listening, there's some water just starting to rush over the road. You see it now up a couple of feet.
Whoa.
In the middle of the road, and the winds are getting bigger.
Whoa!
Now it's up about 6 to 8 feet,
man.
and the trees are, the palm trees are bending sideways, but it gets worse.
Yeah.
It gets way worse.
It eventually gets up to the camera.
Yeah. Yeah, so now you're seeing like 4-foot swells.
Cow.
Yeah, about 15 feet of water
Cresting
at this point.
at the height of this camera.
Yeah, the house goes.
This house is moving.
Yeah, the house goes.
No.
It's absolutely brutal. I mean, this is like a coastal town. Like, that water is almost up to the roof line of this house.
Yeah, like the ocean is like Florida's in the ocean at this point.
Yeah, so
That's
this is the real tragedy. I mean, talk about destruction of property, but also more than likely loss of life, because not everybody could get out from this, right? I mean, I watched a video of a gal who had like 7 people she was caring for and a bunch of pets, and she didn't have anywhere to go. She was stuck in the Tampa Bay area and just couldn't leave. So they were just going to hunker down for it. But how do you hunker down through that?
Right.
Yeah, when your house gets taken away, you can't really hunker down. Hopefully, hopefully people at least got to like elevated places at a minimum.
You hope, but I mean, a lot of Florida is very, very low lying.
No, I know, but I don't know, like maybe that's like a hotel over in the side, get a couple floors up or something. Like hopefully places like that are helping out other people who can't evacuate.
You certainly
in terms
hope
of like
so.
putting them on higher floors and stuff like that.
You certainly hope so. And now
washing over the camera.
Waves cresting over the camera here.
That's
so
wild.
Absolutely devastating stuff. So, a lot of this, all these natural disasters that are occurring, I mean, in such rapid succession, create a lot of questions around why. And a lot of people have what would be called conspiracy theorist views on some of those reasons. And obviously on the flip side of the coin, climate change is being blamed, quite often for the severity of storms that we're experiencing now.
We talked about that a little bit last week, about like the intensity of storms are increasing and kind of the specious correlation there. Could be possible, but really is difficult to prove, especially if you look at the data. There's so much noise, it's difficult to actually draw a trend line that's very clear.
Right.
So we wonder, maybe we'll know this in 100 years, right? That this is a very clear thing that happens, and just a secondary order consequence of industrialization is you get worse hurricanes.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem, by the data we looked at last week, to be the phenomena.
Well, what I would say is, I do think that climate change in the very, very broad sense of the word may be to blame here. But the question is, how much are we as humans contributing to that through our manipulation of the weather?
Directly. Yeah.
And that's a large part of what we're going to dig into here. Weather modification. So I did a bunch of digging on this week. Is a real and substantiated thing. It's been around. The first, reported cases, the operations and projects that they started doing to modify the weather started in the late 40s, 47. And the first of these was called Project Cirrus. Now, Project Cirrus was basically the first attempt to modify a hurricane. It was a collaboration between General Electric, the U.S. Army Signal Corps, the Office of Naval Research, and the Air Force, where they flew 2 bombers adjacent to a hurricane and dropped about 180 pounds of dry ice into the clouds. The theory here, the best I understand it, and I'm not a meteorologist or scientist, is they wanted to try to freeze the water near the eye wall of the hurricane in order to cause it to change, to basically get larger, because the larger the eye is, the slower the wind speeds are. So it makes it less destructive. So obviously a benevolent pursuit here.
I mean, couldn't we just nuke the hurricane?
I was wondering if that was going to come up again.
I love that so much.
Arguably, maybe.
That was our president for 4 years, guys. It could be again.
Could be again.
Kind of hope that quote's true.
Maybe we could inject some bleach into it too. I think
so. In correlation from the Wikipedia article here, pouring liquid nitrogen into the sea to deprive the hurricane of heat energy is one of the theories here. So it kind of works in parallel with our climate change understanding of the intensity of these storms. Right. So it doesn't have to be a mysterious thing. It can be, these are ways that we're looking at doing this that are benevolent in nature, right?
Sure.
Trying to decrease the intensity of a storm using human action.
Absolutely. Now, that said, the heat piece is important, and we'll get more into that a little bit later. But just the same as you can use these technologies to make storms less severe, there are also efforts to weaponize them. And there were some subsequent projects done around weather modification. The next one in line was called Project Storm Fury, which was another attempt to weaken a tropical cyclone, this time by seeding them with silver iodide, which is the common compound that is now used in a lot of cloud seeding operations, which are well substantiated.
Right, so you get stories of Dubai seeding clouds in order to create rain.
Right.
China, I think, does it to try to wash out and clean basically a city before the what was the Olympic Games?
The Olympics,
things like that.
In Dubai, it just so happened to cause massive flooding.
Really?
There was some suspicious timing around that as well, because I believe at that time Dubai had talked about not using the U.S. dollar.
Don't be suspicious.
Talk about conspiracy theories there. We're not going to go super deep into that.
Wait. They cloud seeded their own thing, right?
Yeah, allegedly.
Oh, okay.
Allegedly.
All right. Oh, okay. All right.
Like I said, we're not going to go super deep into that. But yes, so this type of technology is used broadly, has been for many decades. One instance that it was used more as a weapon was let's see, what was it? Operation Popeye. So Operation Popeye.
Operation names make me laugh.
So good, right?
You just wait to get to the MK Ultra one. There, we got some silly names.
Yes.
All right. So Operation Popeye.
Midnight Climax.
Yeah. I gotta move this down because my things got all off. So Operation Popeye was an operation that was carried out during the Vietnam War to inundate the North Vietnamese roads and trail systems that they would use to move troops and supplies, such that it would bog them down. They couldn't get things moving to the front lines of the war. Basically, this operation took place across multiple countries in that region, and for years. It was multiple years worth of operations to try to basically give the United States military an upper hand in that conflict. So there is a substantiated record of weather modification being used as a weapon.
So, and that's interesting too, because it makes strategic sense. If you can extend the monsoon season in the area, only in the areas that your opponent controls, then you can gain tactical advantage. It totally makes sense.
Especially in a jungle, like trying to move stuff through mud and rain and landslides and
Right. And and if Henry Kissinger were to do a thing, it would be a thing that Henry Kissinger would do.
Absolutely. Well, and the thing about that is it was it has been claimed through the research that I've done here that Henry Kissinger and the CIA did this unbeknownst to the Secretary of Defense at the time, who went public and said, no, there's absolutely nothing like this going on.
What's plausibly deniable.
True. So
Right,
whether or not
CIA
he knew or not is a question, but
Yeah.
but the CIA was certainly involved, and to some extent it was a clandestine operation.
Yeah.
And there's other substantiating stuff here as to why some of the more contemporary instances of weather modification might be hidden from the public. A couple of those early operations that I mentioned had effects that the public blamed on these operations. So, for example, it was Project Cirrus when they flew those bombers in and dropped the dry ice. The hurricane, like the next day, took a hard left turn and made landfall at Savannah, Georgia, caused a ton of damage, and the public were like, you guys did this. They saw the cause and effect and were like,
WTF.
what the hell?
Yeah.
So they were outraged, and it took a lot of convincing by the military to convince Congress that it wasn't their fault. The storm was already turning a little bit, and we didn't do this. Similarly, during Storm Fury, they were testing this on a variety of hurricanes, and they'll always pick a hurricane that's like going out to sea. It's not going to threaten people, so it's a safe experiment to run.
Right.
But this one hurricane, Betsy, in 1965, was going to be seeded by Storm Fury, and the public was notified. But then it took a turn towards land, and they called off the operation, but they didn't tell the public. So when it made landfall and it caused a ton of damage, that was the one that Congress was like furious with them. The public was furious with them, and they almost scrapped this program entirely.
Really?
So there's a couple of instances where it's like the public knowing about this causes PR crises for the people doing the research.
And that's very clear to the government if you look at clandestine ops. And it's not, and if you're sitting there saying, yeah, but the government wouldn't do that. Right. And I know our audience is probably like, oh, government would. But if you're at all in that camp, consider for a moment in the 1950s, there were repeated experiments on the American public on chemical and biological warfare as well that we now know about. For example, they spray like bacteria that's supposedly not dangerous over cities across America to experiment on what would happen if this were to happen. And you could find those projects. Let me give you a good one. They actually took foxes, like captured a bunch of wild foxes, spray painted them with like plutonium, like glowing spray paint, right? That was radioactive, and released them into Chesapeake Bay.
Why?
Because they wanted to experiment with doing that in Japan. So they did it first in America. This was during World War II. They did it first in America.
Oh, they wanted to use it as a weapon against the Japanese.
To spark fear because
fox is like a big thing in Japan.
Yeah, Katsume, it was what they're called. They're like these like fox deity, like trickster deities, demons. And so what they did is they released them out, and the water like cleaned off most of the paint, and the foxes like licked them off themselves. And so you had all these foxes that were like poisoned by radiation running around the countryside in the United States. And then they tried to do that in the Pacific Theater, and it totally didn't work for the same reasons.
Geniuses.
All right, this supports Kyle's Neo-Bro thing. Like, let's just see what happens.
Yeah, let's see what happens. The Neo-Bros standing there,
yeah, just like
they're in a room. Like, we take foxes, right? We're gonna paint them orange. We're gonna release them in the wild. It'll freak them out. I'm telling you.
Can you imagine being in that boardroom when that's being pitched? Hear me out.
And then the fact was approved. They were like, great idea, Smith.
Yeah.
Just get after it. Here's $2 billion.
Just Alan Dulles like stroking his mustache.
Oh God.
Yeah, let's try. Fuck it.
Why not?
Let's try it.
No wonder they keep these things from the public. It's because they're stupid. We don't want anyone knowing about how dumb this is.
I'm kind of retarded.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, there's a record of the CIA being involved in weather modification. There's a record of these things being kept from the public. The question is, are they currently doing that, and is it currently being kept from the public? I think there's evidence to suggest that. If we fast forward to the early 90s, that's when HAARP is created. A HAARP is a very common target for conspiracy theorists. It's the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. It's basically an antenna array nestled into the wilderness of Alaska. It's a program that has been in the past when it was originally created.
administered in cooperation between government and military agencies and the University of Alaska at Fairbanks. Basically, what it's designed to do is on paper, it's supposed to research the ionosphere, which is one of the highest ionized levels of Earth's atmosphere. And so basically what it is, it's a giant antenna array, and it basically puts highly energized microwave energy into the upper atmosphere and studies what happens. And it has impacts on the atmosphere. They're not just measuring things. They're actually causing phenomena to occur and then measuring the result. And this thing can be aimed, and it can do all sorts of stuff that we don't even necessarily know about. But it's caused a lot of attention amongst the conspiracy theory circles because of its kind of, unknown, opaque nature and its ability to be potentially targeted.
So my high school science knowledge is rough. It's been a long time, but the ionosphere is quite a bit higher than where most storms take place. So how would an ionosphere change the way a storm would operate?
Yeah. So the way I understand it is that when they punch all this microwave energy into the atmosphere, it does what your microwave oven does. It excites molecules, which creates heat. And that heat creates pressure. So they can basically create a bulge in the atmosphere, and then it comes down and creates a high pressure area where it can then reroute the jet stream and reroute weather patterns.
So how does Alaska do that in, say, the South Pacific if you wanted to mess with China or something like that?
That's a great question. Other than knowing that HARP in Alaska can be targeted in certain directions, there are HARP stations all over the world.
Really?
There's one in England. They're all over. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that makes more sense because then you can triangulate.
Correct.
And if you think about just the basics of triangulation, that works for your GPS and other sorts of geolocation software. If you have multiple points, then you can target.
Right. And you could potentially create even stronger, positive interference between 2 or 3 stations doing, creating an activity in one particular area.
Interesting.
And I would say, too, just before we go much further, a great resource for this is geoengineeringwatch.org. The guy there, Dane Wigington, I believe is his name, Wigington. Great resource for this. He's an accomplished scientist and has done a ton of research on all of this stuff, and was one place where I was going for some of these clips that we're going to show.
What is it? Geoengineering?
Geoengineeringwatch.org.
We'll put it in the notes.
Also,
I think you just solved global warming. You put a bunch of microwaves in the sky, and there we go.
And make it all warm?
We heated the Earth. We did it.
Well, we can avoid an ice age at least.
We fucked it up.
Anthropogenic global warming is real. We are doing it on purpose.
Yeah, we just launched a shitload of microwaves.
It's not industrial operations. It's just the government and scientists doing experiments.
Yep.
Yeah. And this sort of thing is substantiated even further because there's a ton of patents around all this technology.
One of them patent here for method of controlling hurricanes. Is this the same one you were talking about with dropping the in the eye of the storm?
Similar, yes. Now this is
2009.
Yeah, this is an abandoned patent from 2008, I believe. But there are other patents. I mean, they go as far back as the very origins of these programs. 1959, there was a patent filed for control of tropical cyclone formation. 1974, there was a patent for powder contrail generator. I mean, and Geoengineering Watch has a whole page of all the patents through history, and there's like hundreds of them for all sorts of things relating to control of weather.
And it's important to understand when you're talking about patents that, not all patents means that this is what they're doing or that they even work. This is just a way to control the intellectual property of the theory of what they're trying to do.
Right. Which substantiates the fact that they're working on it. And we know that they're working on it. They have been for a long time.
Right. Well, why wouldn't you?
And once it does come to fruition, if an idea does work, there are interests involved that want to have the commercial monopoly over the ability to monetize those technologies.
And the government contracts, right? If you're Boeing, right, and you are already working with the government, all these different elements, and you have a theoretical way to reduce or control the direction of hurricanes, why wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Well, particularly if there were military uses for them. And actually, the use of weather modification as a weapon was outlawed by a treaty. I'm forgetting the name of it. But it is currently not expressly legal at the UN level to use weather as a weapon, even though it has been in the past.
Yeah, I'm sure the U.S. government will pay attention.
I'm sure just like you shouldn't blow up pipelines that serve your allies, you also shouldn't use weather to manipulate things.
This headline made me laugh. This is a headline I would write.
Yeah. The headline for the listeners: a Bill Gates venture aims to spray dust into the atmosphere to block the sun. What could go wrong? And truly, what could possibly go wrong?
That's Forbes. They're not exactly like big skeptics of your homeboy
Ariel Cohen.
No, so this is a slightly different side of the weather modification science and pursuit, which more aims to curtail the amount of solar radiation that the sun can impart upon the earth, which is a little puzzling because, well, maybe the sun can give you a sunburn and maybe it can cause skin cancer. It also is responsible for like vitamin D production and growing all of our food and
anything Bill Gates is a part of, I'm out. No thank you.
At this point,
keep this
Microsoft
guy away.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
Fuck that. That's why I use Apple. Actually, I never told you this, David. That's why I'll never use a PC.
Hating Bill Gates.
I hate Bill Gates. No, but so this is the more substantiated side, the more public facing side. I mean, there are tons of major news stories that have come out like heralding this type of research for ways to combat global warming. I mean, Good Morning America did a long piece on it. Solar radiation modification is a very real thing. Let's go ahead and play that Good Morning America clip.
Okay.
Weather modification, or cloud seeding.
We can't create the cloud. There has to be an existing storm system.
We just give it a bump.
Yeah.
Garrett Kamens heads up one of the largest cloud seeding companies in the U.S.
Has the desperation in the mega drought made the interest in cloud seeding skyrocket?
Oh, definitely.
There are currently 42 cloud seeding projects across the American West, like this one in Utah, where they take planes like this with flares attached. They fly right into the storm and send microscopic particles into the cloud. Particles that act like magnets for water droplets, bonding together until they are heavy enough to fall to the ground as rain or snow. At the University of Colorado, researchers are working on artificial intelligence to deploy cloud seeding drones.
And it's not just cloud seeding from the sky. There are hundreds of those things. That shack you see in the foreground is a ground-based cloud seeder. The little flame coming out is sending tiny silver iodide particles up into the sky. When a storm comes through, they go up to 2,000 feet above our head, into the storm, up those mountains, and make more snow than it naturally would.
Solid drone.
Well, cloud seeding has been helping get every last drop out of some of the driest years on record. This past winter, Mother Nature came through. The Southern Rockies, which feed the Colorado River, got more than 4 times their average snow. But experts say it's still not enough.
As much as cloud seeding is a boost or a help, it's not a solution. The main solution is
conservation.
Cloud seeding.
So
are they taking credit are they saying that this is the reason they got that extra snow?
Well, it's a good question, Bennett. I mean, we look at Dubai.
So
they wanted it to rain in the desert. They caused a flood. They wanted it to snow a little more at the ski resort in California, and they got like record snow, which is good on one side, but it also establishes that they don't have control over this technology.
It is correlation, not causation.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing is an input to the output, right?
Right.
We don't know the degree of effect of the input, but we're definitely doing an input.
Exactly. And we don't know the unintended consequence, the broader ripple effect of what modifying climate or weather in one place might have on other places or the broader weather system around the world.
And to kind of go back to the fluoride thing, this is an example of the large order effects of like a group effort that have unintended effects on an individual where they don't really get a choice in the matter.
Right.
And that's, but additionally to that, if you can reduce, say for example, if we deployed something that prevented Hurricane Helene from having the devastation it could by modifying it or directing it in a different way so it would back out to sea, I don't know, but where it would be less impactful, obviously there's value there for many individual lives that if the secondary consequence was more rain or less rain or whatever, that might have been worth it. We can't replay back that historical thing And it's a bit of a hubristic idea, right? That we have the smart scientists who are going to say, oh, this can be a really bad storm, so we're just going to modify it this way to make it a little bit better without consulting all the people who are actually affected.
Right.
Exactly. And that's but the trick is that if you could consult the people who are affected in Hurricane Helene who lost a family member, they say absolutely. Right.
Sure.
So how do you judge that?
If the effect was positive,
right,
which we don't know that it always will be. If you can turn a storm towards the sea, you could also maybe accidentally turn it towards land and cause more loss of life.
I don't know. I guess this kind of goes to the toss of it's like, yeah, just direct it towards, I don't know, like fucking all the islands in the Caribbean. Like then they get fucked.
Right.
Right.
So it's just like, I don't know.
It's sort of is it the trolley problem? Am I misquoting?
Yeah, right.
Where you've got a bunch of people on one side and one person on the other, and you can change the track, which track the trolley goes on. Which one do you pick? Is it all the people or just one?
Right.
How do you choose?
Right. You blow up the trolley. But anyways,
flip a coin.
That's the correct answer.
So we want to get into this on Dubai controlling their weather.
Are there people on the trolley though?
Let's do it.
By the way, on the last one, I really had this image of you working for the news station, like having to drag on the little droppings, a boop sound.
I also
like there was some Bennett doing that somewhere.
That's that was the shit I had to do.
What do you do if you live in the middle of the desert and need water? You make it rain. Scientists in Dubai can now literally modify their weather. This technology could change the world as we know it, but will controlling the weather be used for good or for evil? In July of 2021, the United Arab Emirates National Center of Meteorology released a video showing a rainstorm that had been created using weather-modifying technology. How did they make it rain in the desert, you might ask? Scientists in Dubai used high-powered lasers and other advanced technology that were mounted to drones to make the rain fall from the desert sky. It should come as no surprise that one of the world's wealthiest cities would need a lot of resources, and the fact that Dubai resides in the desert with no source of fresh water nearby means that H2O is a hot commodity, both literally and figuratively. The city of 3.4 million residents receives around 15 million tourists, but only about 4 inches of rainfall every year. In order to support its own population and the booming tourism industry, Dubai needs to import a lot of goods. This is especially true for food and water. Being in the desert with very little rainfall isn't just a problem for obtaining water, but without the vital resource, crops are hard to grow as well. So how does Dubai plan to overcome the problem? By making their own rain using drones. The weather isn't very kind in Dubai as the sandstorms can reach a speed of 62 miles per hour. This means tiny grains of sand are whipped against buildings and anyone stuck outside at the speed of a car driving on the highway. Also, since the land the city sits on is not solid rock, the engineers of Dubai have had to come up with some unique solutions to construction problems. In fact, the skyscrapers in the city are held up by more friction than by traditional methods of building into the bedrock.
That's terrifying.
They've even terraformed the region by building a palm tree-shaped island that's covered with luxury homes and resorts. To construct the island, the United Arab Emirates dredged up enough sand from the seafloor to encircle the earth 3 times. But regardless of how much terraforming or engineering is done in Dubai, water scarcity is the biggest problem of all. Yet, scientists have found a way to manifest clouds and rain using artificial means. Is this safe? We'll let you be the judge.
Only if there's fluoride in it.
Will they fluoridate the cloud
Teeth
seeding?
are going to be great.
So this kind of brings us to the modern era of weather modification and this technology called NEXRAD, which is basically like next generation radar. It operates on S-band microwave, which is used for a lot of applications. That includes airport surveillance radar, air traffic control, weather radar, Wi-Fi, even microwave ovens, cell phones. Like a lot of things use this band of radiation. So it's not incorrect to consider it very similar to your microwave oven and how it functions. So there's a really interesting video that we're going to pull up here, and I just want to preface it really quick. We talked about the cloud seeding media that they're using. They mentioned in this clip, it's silver iodide. Mm-hmm. It's a highly conductive mineral, electrically conductive. And electrically conductive materials, like tinfoil perhaps, don't go well when mixed with microwaves, right?
Oh, right.
You put tinfoil or metal, anything in the microwave, it sparks. It creates a lot of craziness, right? They interact. Right. So it substantiates the claim that radar, when used with seeded clouds, can have some impact
on them, not just measurement of them, which is what we typically understand radar to be used for. We use Doppler radar to see clouds coming and to, predict what the weather's going to do. In this case, there could be a relationship that allows for the radar to actually manipulate those things. So let's pull up this clip. We can start it from the beginning here, David.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why it pulled it from there.
Was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just the result of natural processes and climate patterns, or was it manipulated? The circular blue flashes seen in this video are frequency transmissions from the NEXRAD network of transmitter installations. All available science evidence makes clear that atmospheric frequency transmissions can and do have a repelling effect on air masses, especially if and when the air masses have been seeded with electrically conductive nanoparticles. The brighter the blue flash from a frequency transmission installation, the more pronounced and powerful the repelling effect on any air mass or storm in the vicinity will be. Where there are no blue flashes, there is no transmission, thus no repelling effect, thus no resistance for a migrating storm. Translation: a migrating storm will be hindered from moving toward frequency transmissions and will easily migrate in a direction with no transmissions. So again, I ask, was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just an act of nature, or was it engineered? You decide.
That was kind of nuts.
I don't think I understand that. So why is when you look at this, I'm going to go back. Why is the kind of pulses moving left to right and starting on the East Coast and moving to the right coast? Is that like over a day as the light moves by that these radio stations going off? Is that what it's measuring?
Yeah. So those blue orbs that illuminate in that sort of wave motion, those are frequency transmission towers. Those are NEXRAD stations.
Okay.
Which are basically putting microwave energy into the environment.
Those are weather stations, right?
That's
they're
right.
Measuring. They're seeing the clouds in their area.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
But not just seeing the clouds potentially, possibly also repelling them, given that the clouds are seeded with this conductive material. I mean, you can kind of see.
If you're saying in the case of it being a seeded cloud,
yes, which most of them are.
How do we know most of them are?
Well, I mean, so we know that Bill Gates is spraying silver iodide and other compounds into the clouds, right, into the sky to seed them to create rain. That's the particle that they use to create rain, right? So we know that that's happening all over the world. I mean, you can look up and you can see the spraying operations. They're very differentiable from a traditional contrail, which is a condensation trail that comes out behind a plane when, that air is forced through a jet engine and it's cooled and it creates ice crystals. That's what you see, but they go away. The other things don't, right? They fan out and they become this sort of like haze, this filtered sunlight that we hear our meteorologists talking about on TV sometimes.
Okay.
Right. So like that's happening all over the place. I'm not saying that happened during Helene. I don't know. I don't have evidence of that.
Right.
But should those weather patterns have been seeded in any way before with silver iodide, it would substantiate that there could be some interactivity, some ability potentially for these radar stations to have an effect on the direction of that weather system.
Okay, so I guess one thing I'm wondering about as we're talking about it is how pervasive is cloud seeding? Right. Is it a niche industry that's done sometimes, or is it, like you said, when I'm engaging in this issue on contrails, for example, in chemtrails, right, is the other word for it, that people are kind of bringing in a more conspiratorial view or talking about weather modification when they're talking about this issue. When a commercial jet flies over an area and it has a long sustained contrail, is that accusation that all of those are chemtrails, or is it saying that some of them are and that they're actually using commercial airplane flights to do weather seeding? Because when I get on an airplane, a commercial airline, I don't see those things dripping off the back. Yeah, right.
No, I don't have any personal evidence to suggest that commercial aircraft are expelling silver iodide.
Right.
I guess it's possible that it is put in as a fuel additive and it's not visible to the naked eye, but I can't substantiate that personally, and I would say that warrants more research. A lot of the applications you see this coming from, I mean, you can see pictures of like military C-130s with
sprayers off the back and stuff. I mean, there's
Sure.
well,
that makes sense because it's on scale, right? It's on it's a big airplane that can fly a long time, that can seed an area.
right.
That
and
makes
it's
sense.
it's doing a project for that purpose, not just, oh, we got this flight going from A to B, so we're just going to do this while we're on our way.
Right.
That I don't think is maybe as common as maybe some of the conspiracy theorist inclined folks might want to think.
Okay.
But I don't know, and I'm open to changing my mind on
What's
that.
possible, it's just put into all airline fuel, and that's a way to do it. But I don't know if the combustion of jet fuel can
Right.
have additives.
It's
right?
it's a major question.
Jet fuel.
Maybe that's why jet engines are exploding these days.
It melts steel beams,
that's
but I'm
just
not sure if it can.
Yeah, I see what you did there.
See clouds. But I don't know. I just don't know. I don't have the background to be able to distinguish that.
Yeah. No. So there are. I think actually towards the end of this video, you might see when they advertised their film, The Dimming. At least on one of the videos I watched, there was an actual shot of a C-130 with spray coming off of the entirety of the wingspan, creating one of those wide bands of particulate matter that spread out and create that sort of shield that they're using to reflect the sun, right? This is a major component of what they're doing for solar radiation modification, reducing the amount of sunlight that hits the earth. So I would say, I mean, without having any direct evidence of yes, there was a cloud seeding flight in the path of Helene and it, threw a bunch of particles into that weather pattern. It's hard to say definitively whether or not that was the cause, but you can look at that video and you can see that the path of the storm, while it feels like it wants to continue rotating and spinning off and weakening over the central, the Midwest United States, it does kind of stay contained in that spot right over, the southeast, over the Appalachian region.
You mean in the video, or do you mean
in the
Hurricane
video that we
Helene?
just watched?
Oh, okay. Because that wasn't Helene. That was totally a wrong trajectory. It came out through
I believe that was actually
Georgia. Oh, was it?
I believe it
I
was.
thought it was.
Yeah.
I was kind of watching the other lights and not the hurricane.
One more time just to make sure we're on the right basis here.
Yeah.
So
Hurricane
it
Helene.
lands here. Oh.
Yeah. It says it right
Comes
at
up
the top.
through the Carolinas, through Georgia. Yep. And then
So-
you see how it kind of curls in.
Why wasn't Tampa Bay more affected? Why is it so devastating for Appalachia, but not? Because I thought Hurricane Helene was coming in this way.
No, it came out of the Gulf.
It got a little bit of Florida.
Oh, okay.
But Tampa Bay is further south.
And there are people out there, I mean, in sort of the conspiracy land of X that are tracking flights, right? Because there are NOAA jets that are constantly flying around these hurricanes, measuring things. Who knows what else? That's a big question.
Could be trying to direct it. That's
what
very
else
possible.
are they doing?
Yeah, right. Or
have the time.
de-intensify. Or
they have all the time because they have all of our tax dollars funding that.
No, he means
the people tracking it.
Good
Good
really
question.
interested in, man.
Hey,
Someone's
look,
gotta
some
people have
people,
hobbies.
yeah, some people like to play D&D like you nerds, and some people like to, track flights on X, So anyway, yeah, this is, I think, the big question that a lot of people are asking, and obviously I don't know that any readily available answers are going to come to light. But no question that this is a phenomenon that is occurring with much higher frequency and direction. And here we have a clip of Michio Kaku.
And it was mentioned pretty casually that lasers, in there. And okay, so that's a different whole
Lasers
set
on
of
drones.
technology platform for doing this. So radio waves, right? HARP, high frequency.
High frequency.
2As?
2As.
Yeah.
I have it here. Sorry, it always gets me. High frequency active auroral research program.
Yeah, so those ionosphere waves, and then you have chemical spraying, and then you have lasers as another technology stack,
right?
As an idea to excite particles, because that's what a laser is. It's highly excited photon particles.
And that's exactly what he gets into in this clip.
Unmute it.
About climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right, lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Extraordinary seeing Al Gore and Bill Clinton there together with Charlie, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, they did not get into this discussion, though. But it is fascinating. I mean, lasers, really, to change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far it works. When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Katie, go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to,
right?
Alleged to.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now. And in the laboratory, sure enough, they precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam.
So what does it mean for drought areas that need to have rain for crops, and if they don't have them, there's the consequences of famine?
Well, the bad news is if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it.
Lasers.
Yeah. Frickin' lasers.
Interestingly, and I can't find the source right this second. I'll see if I can find it. We can throw it in the show notes. But amongst this research I was doing last night, there were signs on the radar imagery of Helene and Milton.
Is that this one?
Of very fine lines. I'm not sure, but very, very fine lines going from places in Georgia and other areas like off the coast of Florida, pointing at the storm, like pencil thin lines that.
Is this showing up on Doppler? Is that what you're talking about?
These ones were. Yes, these ones were on overhead imagery, radar imagery of the hurricanes themselves. I'm not sure if lasers show up on Doppler radar, but
yeah, because the Doppler moves much slower than a photon laser, right? So I don't know if that would it be able to bounce off of it and catch it?
I don't know.
Weird.
That's outside of my scope, but interesting stuff nevertheless. And I think what this is all kind of culminating in is what we touched on earlier, and that is like we have all these abilities to modify the weather. We have evidence of weather modification. So we know it's being done. We don't know a lot about it because it's very clandestine these days, and I think because of the.
So check another one off for conspiracy
I think maybe. Really, what I think what it points to is the aggregate unintended consequence of kind of playing God in this sense. And if we're modifying this storm, modifying that storm, we're putting tons of radiation into the atmosphere for all sorts of reasons, from satellites, for internet, for GPS, for Wi-Fi, for Doppler, radio.
Yeah.
Like we are inundated with microwaves in our atmosphere and just in our everyday lives. And these things are having consequences. And whether or not it was intentional to steer Helene or Milton or any of these storms into population centers to make them worse than they are, it could be a reason to look at our activities, our governmental activities, our military activities with regard to weather modification, and take a really hard look at what the broader causes of those are.
And at least one of those is that the correlation between an increased intensity of use of microwave signals, cloud seeding at the same time we're explaining everything with carbon emissions in the atmosphere and the heat of water in the Gulf. These are correlated, entangled input phenomena. How do you untangle it to say, well, it's necessarily climate change? It could be these secondary order consequences of cloud seeding and these other things.
Right.
That's a minimum theory, right?
Absolutely.
The maximum theory is that this is an intended use, and we can dive into the maximum theory. We are a podcast. We can talk whatever the fuck we want.
That's right.
So we're going to talk about that as well. What are the, and obviously I am always suspicious anytime a fact check comes out and says, no, we're not controlling the hurricanes. Fact check.
Yeah. The claim, NEXRAD, Doppler radar, and HARP were used to control the path of Hurricane Helene. There's literally no evidence here. No evidence is presented in this fact check at all to suggest that this is not happening.
Rating
they just said
false.
It's not happening.
It is not possible to
Helene
control
is a
weather.
natural phenomenon. This is the definition of mononarrative.
Yeah.
It's just like, just tell the people what they want to hear, dispel the rumors, and move on.
Well, you have the key phrase, experts said.
Love me some experts.
It also says at a large scale. So are they doing it at a small scale?
Well, and that could be true, right? It could be that everything we're pointing to works on a small scale, but we don't yet have the capabilities to do it at the scale that they're talking about. That could be a hole in the story because we don't really understand the breadth and depth of weather Does anyone have a track of this is how many planes are currently flying weather modification efforts across the United States at a given time?
Allegedly, there is required by law a log of weather modification projects that have been undertaken or are being undertaken.
Is that just reported to the government or is that publicly available data?
I'm not certain about that. I'll have to look. But allegedly there is a log under the same law or international treaty that substantiates that weather modification can't be used as a weapon.
Right.
It says the same thing. We have to track it and it has to be available.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
But whether or not they are is another question because we know that a lot of these technologies, HARP was, originally, I believe, funded at least in part by DARPA, right? There's a lot of black budget stuff that could be going on behind the scenes that we don't know anything about because it's classified.
Exactly. If you get into the question of clandestine operations, which we will in the skiff, I'm going to, at least the first framing that we're going to get into is how the government has justified its plausible deniability claims using the Central Intelligence Agency and the enabling language of the National Security Act to be able to say, we get to lie to the public when it's in the interest of national security.
Right.
And if you were developing, just in theory, if you were developing a weapon to take advantage of the weather in order to, like we did in Vietnam in the current day, you would be able to lie to the public about the development of weather, especially if it was done domestically to experiment on U.S. populations.
Absolutely. And there's another corollary to this. It's another it's another reason to lie to the public under the national security reasoning if you're trying to develop energy independence with EVs from China. China is currently producing a ton of lithium, right? And we know that there's a proposed lithium mine in the mountains of North Carolina, directly in the path of Hurricane Helene, where all the destruction currently is. And
so we have an NPR article here. A proposed lithium mine presents a climate versus environment conflict. This is from November of last year.
So the residents of Gaston County, which is heavily, heavily impacted by Helene, have been fighting this mine for a long, long time, as most people do, right? You don't want an open pit mine in your backyard because... Well, it destroys the environment. It destroys like the mountains and the trees and the things that you like to enjoy as an outdoors person. And it can potentially impact water quality and soil health and all sorts of stuff, right? It's not like a pleasant thing to have near you. So these residents have been fighting this. And at this point, well, they're not really fighting anything. They're fighting for their lives instead of fighting this mine.
So is the theory that you basically degrade, if you direct this into this area, it degrades their ability to organize politically to fight for this mine.
Yes, to fight against it.
To fight against it.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. And there's some interesting stuff surrounding this. So the Piedmont mine, as it's known, is it's being administered by a company called Albemarle Corp. So the Albemarle Corporation is based in North Carolina. And they have proposed and gone through all the permitting of this mine site. Now, according to Yahoo Finance, the primary investor in Albemarle
BlackRock
is, well, actually Vanguard. But another prominent investor in Albemarle Corp is Doug Emhoff, husband of Kamala Harris. Yes. So there are some paths.
Don't be suspicious.
I'm no Ian Carroll here, but there are certainly some pathways for this to look very suspicious in terms of if weather modification were a thing, or if you wanted to maybe just like clear the way for your mine project, these things could all kind of coalesce, and it would maybe make some sense as to why the government is a little bit absent
parallels to
in the repair work.
Maui.
A lot of parallels to Maui.
A lot of real estate development now.
Right. So
meanwhile, the areas of like the people of each area only get $725 to $750.
Yeah, that's not going to put your house back on its foundation.
Well, technically, they should get insurance claims and things like that too.
Yes,
like I get it,
but only if you have flood insurance, and if you live on a mountain, then you're probably not thinking about flood insurance.
Yeah, you should have natural disaster and other kind of act of God insurance type stuff too. But I do get, I get that. I get the concern. I do get that. But we also have a tremendous amount of federal spending on this as that people will be drawing from over the coming years to rebuild. This isn't like we're totally flat-footed here. It can't. I just don't like the overstating of things, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
It's not just $750. So one of the questions here that I have about this Piedmont Lithium mining company is, are they? So the theory is that the government has this effort that they want to create more lithium mining in the United States, so they're not relying on China and Africa to get those resources. So they're going to do it here.
Yeah.
And these locals are in the way, so they get hit by the hurricane. Now they're not going to be able to do that. One of the great questions there is that going to be what's going to develop over the next year, right? And the next year we see these things move forward. That would be some confirmation, but not clearly that we don't have like evidence that the government is coordinating with these folks. But that said, a lot of this stuff is done behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
Like for example, the effort to bring in Burisma into the U.S. controlled gas markets is, pretty clearly laid out now if you're paying attention. And we'll dig into that a little bit with the CIA stuff if we wanted to. But those efforts to control natural resources using the government are old. They've been going on forever.
Yeah.
We're very comfortable when we talk about for oil when it comes to Iraq or Iran, but we suddenly just lose all of our natural senses that the government can do that sort of thing or is interested in that sort of thing when it comes to lithium or when it comes to natural gas.
Or when it's deployed domestically as opposed to in a faraway desert.
So my point is it isn't that there is no motive here. There's clearly a clear motive potentially, but that doesn't mean that we don't know that, right? We
don't know that.
We don't have material evidence, and we don't have like the means. Right?
And we probably won't have material evidence.
Have the means. We have the means in the sense of like, in theory, it's possible to direct a storm.
Yeah.
Right. So we have means and motive, but no material like smoking gun.
And I think the material evidence will be hard to come by because if this is a matter of national security, you just
classify everything.
Yeah, you just classify it.
Yeah.
And it's done.
Yeah, and be very liberal with your use of national security.
So this is
Always.
a narrative on the ground, as I'm seeing here from the local news report on the lithium mine, or?
Yes. Yep. This is more about the conflict between the citizens and the mining company.
We don't have to dig into that. We can just keep going.
Yeah. Well, another interesting factor here, another potential motive is election related. We're obviously less than a month away from November 5th.
I did see this one.
And, these are states that have been affected that are probably going to go heavily into a certain direction electorally. And so here's a report from Fox News. I want to preface this by saying the quality of this video is natively very low, so apologize for the grainy resolution.
Hurricane Helene wreaked havoc on North Carolina. The state will be reeling from the damage for years. And the storm just isn't impacting people's lives. It's affecting the election. Last night, the North Carolina Board of Elections announced changes to voting rules in counties impacted by Hurricane Helene. And some people are concerned. Senior political correspondent Kevin Cork is here. Kevin.
Evening, Jesse. They're talking about major changes in the voting process. Now, this is, they say, designed to help displaced voters in the Tar Heel state not only cast their ballots, but also make sure they have their voices heard this November. However, some Republicans are expressing deep reservations about the plan because of concerns about voter integrity. Now, the changes were approved by unanimous vote by the bipartisan board, coming just 10 days before early voting begins in the battleground state, and even as mail-in voting is already underway. Now, a couple of the changes I want to tell you about, including this: voters in the 13 counties that have been heavily affected by Hurricane Helene will now have more ways to obtain and deliver absentee ballots. By the way, more storms coming possibly. Voters in those counties will have longer to apply for absentee ballots. They'll be allowed to drop their ballots off anywhere in the state, not just in their home county. There will also be teams that will be sent to storm relief centers to help register more voters and, you guessed it, collect more ballots. What's more, the county boards will also be able to, by a bipartisan majority, hire poll workers from other counties and then move them all around the state to ensure there are enough experienced workers at each voting site. Now, the problem is, say critics, Jesse, we don't know where they're going to draw these poll workers from. And with ballots being able to be dropped off anywhere in the state, how can anyone accurately contest voter turnout discrepancies, say, in different counties? And keep this in mind, North Carolina was one of the last states to report back in 2020. It took them 10 days to certify the general election, despite being a relatively small state. Now, I can also add this very quickly. President Trump's team, the Trump-Vance campaign, issued a statement tonight asking for more access for North Carolinians. They say it is super important that the people who've already suffered from the storm don't lose their right to take part in this important election. And big amen for that, Jesse.
Interesting.
Big amen.
So
Big
is,
amen.
is the theory there that with the changes, it's going to be easier to stuff ballot boxes with false ballots?
I think
the argument.
I think that's exactly the claim that he's making. I think if you look back at 2020, a lot of the discrepancies and questions around that election stemmed from absentee ballots. It's far easier to, commit fraud in that way.
This is the accusation.
The accusation.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I personally think that would be true. It's far easier to drop a bunch of ballots in a remote box than to walk in and present an ID or whatever and vote in person as someone else, right? So I think that's the main concern. And the interesting thing I find particularly interesting is the part about certifying voter turnout. If you can drop your ballot off in any county in the state, if you're expecting 15,000 voters in a particular county and you get 20 or 30, could that be because there were ballots just dropped off, or could that be because you have a bunch of people from an affected county voting in that other county?
When you vote by absentee, you have your name and address on the envelope that the ballot comes in. See, that would probably be attributed to that, because you don't know who you vote for, but you know who votes. That's how voting records work, right? So if you have always the phenomena of whether or not absentee ballots are legit or not is the degree to which it connects to someone who is known via other systems. Does that make sense? So you have your GSTAT system or your geolocation systems that say who owns what house and who lives where. And if there's a correlation between the voting information of who has and hasn't voted and who lives where and who consumes what, those two databases, as you connect them, that's what authenticates, in theory, your elections, right? Whether or not someone is voting but doesn't live anywhere, right? That would be a false person. Or just someone we don't have information on, right? They rent and they don't have a credit card and they don't consume, they don't have an Albertsons card or an Albertsons membership or something like that. Does that make sense? So those sorts of databases are what authenticate secondhand our elections beyond the voter registration base and the voting totals. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in theory, if you live in one county and vote in another by drop off, it should still go to your county because it's still attributed that you voted.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Although, once again, the ballots are secret. So you initially mail them in with your name and all that kind of stuff. If you just drop off a ballot that doesn't connect it to a name, like on the outside of it, what happens is the process is that they get the initial stuff that has the name and signature and all that jazz. They take it out of that and they throw it into a bin, right? And then they count the ballots separately. So they don't know who voted for who.
Right.
That's how the process is supposed to work. At least I know a lot about Montana's system. I don't know about South Carolina or North Carolina or Georgia, which are really the states at play here.
Right.
I assume.
Right.
Do you think this is a reasonable concern that they're voicing here about election integrity around the storm?
Well, I mean, I don't know what the voting rules are. It's really in the minutia of how you judge the voting rules. Now, if I step back and I just say, okay, taking all that aside, we're just going to push that back for a moment and just look at the strategic landscape. I did do that. I heard about this this concern, and so I this is a website called 270 to Win, and it's basically just a modified map of the electoral count. So if you're trying to change the trajectory of a presidential election, you have to get to 270 plus 1 votes, right?
Yep.
Or 269 plus 1. Well, the states that are affected are Georgia, which was a margin vote in the last presidential election, and South Carolina, which is a solid red vote, which is probably, you have to understand, if voter fraud exists, it has to exist on the margin, because the larger you get to affect outside the margin, the more risk you bear. Does that make sense?
Like the more, like it's easier to tell that there's voter fraud?
Well, yeah. Even the Democrats or even the deep
like
state
I'm a child.
have limited means, right? You have limited time, limited personnel, limited money, right? So you want to affect things on the margin at the effective minimum dose, because otherwise you can get caught. Does that make sense? So you don't change Kansas,
right?
Because they're a solid red state, right? You don't change Montana's blue vote. You don't even try, right? What you do is, if you're going to do it, you do it on low accountability, poor areas like reservations, right? That's been a long accused thing in Montana, for example.
Or Appalachia, maybe.
Or Appalachia, right? But once again, that's South Carolina, right?
North.
That is North Carolina was mostly affected. So they are a marginal state. So then the motive becomes, okay, there's a case to that motive. Is there a case to the material evidence of that? No.
Yeah, it runs through multiple states.
Yeah, I know. What I meant is where the biggest effect of Helene was. And I'm sorry, I've confused South and North Carolina for the second there. So if you look at this map, you'll see that North Carolina is considered a swing state. So is Georgia. And that was true in 2020. So if you look at the notes here, this puts up Democrats up by 26. But it does, I think, make some pretty bad assumptions. Like Iowa's definitely going to be red. I think Arizona's case for being red is pretty solid this year. Texas is definitely, there's no way that's not going that way with the border. But then Ohio, definitely red in my view. But if you swing North Carolina, even in a fairly ideal circumstance for Republicans, where they get these states, Republicans are still up. But if your assumptions here are wrong in any way and they're still swing, Democrats have a real shot.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to consider this as an algorithmic or statistical likelihood. So they're getting a lot closer to 250, 270 at that point.
Yeah. For those of you just listening, we're playing around with this map, changing states from red to blue, seeing how the numbers affect, the outcome.
Right.
And if you're listening on Spotify, you can watch on Spotify as well. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe some people don't know that, but you can.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So if there is an electoral component to all of this, it could potentially decide the election.
Yeah, if for some reason, and it could decide it in a very clear, non-conspiratorial way. If voter repression is down in North Carolina amongst rural areas, which typically vote more red, and I think the quote from the Trump campaign there is revealing. Low absentee ballot rates in Georgia probably were responsible for losing the Senate race, the after-election Senate race. So Trump loses, he comes out and says it's all rigged. The absentee ballot system was rigged. Less people voted by absentee ballot in Georgia. The standard explanation of reason why that Senate race went the way it was did, beyond the candidate being flawed. They had a flawed Senate candidate that year. It didn't look. I mean, it was absentee ballots were relatively low, especially in rural poor areas, which are consistently red on president. And that seems to be true nationwide. Oh yeah, I also didn't mark Florida as a solid red. If Florida goes anything else, I'm just going to blow my mind.
How do you think Nevada's going to go? That one's just hanging out there in the West.
It's always a swing state. You don't know where the mobs are going to swing stuff. You know how I think, Juan.
I think Juan.
He knows. But if even if in the worst case scenario where you lose these two and you have Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona have a lean red, Republicans are still in a solid spot. So it depends on how you interpret the map. And it's such a diverse set of information. And I am not an expert on presidential elections, so don't get me wrong here. I know I'm enough to be dangerous, but not enough to claim expertise. I don't think that even in the worst case scenario, Republicans, at least president, lose.
Really?
Right. Yeah, there could be other concerns because I mean, look at the map. I mean, like if you see Arizona leans red, Nevada's a swing, but Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania all lean red, which I think is likely in this current environment with inflation, with immigration, with foreign policy, with the response to Appalachia. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if Pennsylvania doesn't go red this election. I have no idea what Wisconsin and Michigan are going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, they're heavily labor states, so traditionally I think we would think they would go blue. But it does seem like the labor vote is feeling a little turned off by the Kamala Walz, Harris Walz ticket.
And it's also natural gas, resources, all that kind of stuff. The fracking, all that jazz is all heavily impacted.
Immigration policy.
Yeah. Competitive with those states. And then there's the Reagan Republican phenomena has traced with Trump pretty closely, where you have blue dog Democrats, people who are socially conservative, personally identifying the Democrat Party with radical communists, left-wingism, and then kind of shirking off their union representatives and going that way.
Yeah.
That happened with Nixon. It happened with Reagan, and it happened with Trump in 2016. Could it happen again? Yeah. These are overwhelmingly also demographically male voting demographics, right? Where their propensity to vote for a female is mostly negative whether or not how do they identify them archetypally. And I don't see Kamala coming off substantially different than Hillary in that.
Sure.
She doesn't seem likable.
Yeah.
To those people, I don't think.
Dude, what do you mean? She's so brat?
Yeah, I know,
She's so
exactly. And things like going on Call Her Daddy is not going to cultivate that weakest link.
That's interesting.
So that is a base play, not a...
So I just want to circle back on the labor piece. You said, I mean, obviously it's the union reps that come out and say this labor union endorses X.
Yes.
But that obviously doesn't mandate that their membership vote that way. And in fact, and often in this case, the sort of Reagan case that you cite, they go the opposite direction.
Yes, that can't happen. And it's usually with their spending. That's the real tragedy of it. You'll have a guy who gives their money to a union every year or every month, and then they spend that money on the candidate they don't want to support.
Oh, wow.
But that happens all the time.
Jeez.
All right.
Fascinating stuff.
I think we exercised the demons on that one pretty good.
I think we did.
So in conclusion, the weather's controlled.
In conclusion, we don't know, but maybe.
Well, you know what? I think
it's possible.
Time will tell on some of this stuff as more evidence comes out. And obviously,
it could follow that typical format where it isn't real, it doesn't happen. You're a conspiracy theorist if you do. Well, it happens sometimes, and
it's really
actually
cool
good.
It's
actually real. And if you don't like it, you're a white supremacist. You know.
Where are we on that arc right now?
I think we're starting to acknowledge it's
happening.
It's happening. It's cool that it happens.
Isn't it so awesome that happens?
I mean, Good Morning America seems to think it's really cool that it happens.
Yeah, she seems stoked.
Yeah. Well, she looks like she might be a skier, so I mean, I'd be stoked for a little extra snowfall. That's fair. That's fair. Hurricanes, whatever.
All right. So this week we had
some surfer.
I'm trying to pivot here, Bennett.
We're pivoting.
Sorry. You're in the wrong seat for that. Pivot.
Where are we? Where's this? This looks lovely.
This is the Christians Island in
Christensen.
I don't know what the little zero means after it. I got to ask that guy.
I think it's just a different pronunciation.
Oh.
The O with the slash through.
Yeah.
That's just a letter.
Yeah.
just like a
I don't know what that zero in that word is all about.
Thing going on there. So, forgive my ignorance.
I don't know what's with that zero.
That's what it looks like. It looks like a zero, isn't it?
It's a letter.
I think we need to take
I know it's a letter.
We need to take a podcast field trip to
okay, all right.
Dude, I'll go back.
Global traveler. Pronounce this word for me.
Ostersone.
Oh, it's an O?
Yeah.
The little O?
Ostersone?
Right, so we're going to throw it over to English here.
Ostersone? No? Is the second S silent, Ben?
I just mispronounced it.
We're all revealing our ignorance here. Let's move on.
Well, okay, so what we do know a little bit about is the Nordstream Pipeline, which we've been covering since the initial crises. The breaking news that happened this week that isn't breaking news is America discovered that the Danish have been reporting on this, and they dropped a very important piece of information on this story, right?
Should we remind people why this is so important really quick? Because it's been a while since we've covered Nordstream.
Yeah.
If you're
we
new...
did do a secondary one, but yeah, that was probably a month or two
We've
ago.
really touched on it 3 times.
Yeah.
This will be the 4th time, honestly. So the first time we did 2 reportings on it on the Seymour Hersh angle of it. What happened was after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the Biden administration got up and said, if they do this, when it was all about to happen, Nordstream, there's going to be a cost to pay, and the Nordstream's going to
go away.
Go away. After the invasion, a couple months later, this Nordstream 1 and 2 are exploded by underwater demolitions somehow.
Obviously, Russia did it.
Obviously, Russia
The
did
first blame was Russia. And what's interesting about this article is the amount of Dutch leadership that are still on that is surprising, because American leadership doesn't even try, because no one believes them here.
Yeah.
But the Dutch seem to believe it, right? Or at least are still entertaining.
To believe what?
That Russia did it in order to make Ukraine look bad.
Oh.
That they would do it as a false flag.
Oh.
So, and don't get me wrong, there's a certain amount of openness there that I do appreciate.
Also, can we hold on? You said Dutch. I assume you mean Danish.
Danish. Sorry.
Yeah.
Danish.
Okay. Just I was gonna say the Scandinavian countries all fucking hate Russia.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, that makes sense, right? They're a direct threat to them. They're in their sites. They have a long history there. I'm not judging that. It's just there's a difference in Americans' attitude towards our government that when you read German or Danish or Dutch or Netherlands, or I checked out a whole bunch of the reporting across a bunch of different websites to try to find a way to do this without paying, because paying on these websites when you're an American is a pain in the butt. I did finally get this one to work, but but basically what their approach is very much like they tend to repeat these claims a little bit with a little bit more sincerity than I think American press does.
Yeah.
Because we see it and we're like, well, there's no way Russia would bomb their own pipeline, right?
Yeah. Well, and just to recap, the reasons why this is so important is, one, this is the largest case of industrial sabotage in the world, released a ton of greenhouse gas emissions, right? So it's a huge climate disaster, if that's your piece. And also, if the U.S. did it, they did it to the detriment of our ally, Germany, who relies on Russian gas for their entire economy.
Right.
And they're in a bad way right now without it. Energy costs are through the roof. So finding out who did this is like tremendously important to geopolitics.
Yes.
Okay.
Seymour Hersh release, and Seymour Hersh is, we're actually going to go back to him again, but he's one of the reasons why we even know MKUltra exists. He worked with the initial whistleblower to discover the actual details of that program beyond its name.
He was also he was pretty integral in finding out that the reason we got into Vietnam was a hoax.
The My Lai massacre.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Yeah.
No, he revealed the My Lai massacre. He also has done reporting on what you're talking about. It's not a hoax. It was just at worst case scenario. It was a false pretense,
false flag.
Tonkin Gulf.
Yes, the Tonkin Gulf incident. He's done a ton of reporting. Abu Ghraib he was involved in. A lot of our insights into the clandestine covert ops world have been with Seymour, right? And it has almost never been in a way that is to the benefit of the intelligence community, although he maintains a lot of relationships within the intelligence community. And of course, a lot of that comes with a caveat that you have to trust Seymour, because a lot of this stuff is confirmation that you can confirm it, but you can't, there's no smoking gun evidence, because he has to keep his sources anonymous in order to maintain his reporting.
Right.
But what we did get this week, and then the third part of that was the Andromeda story. So initially it happens, it was Russia. Seymour comes in, says it was the United States using Navy divers. And then Germany with ZDF and Der Spiegel released a report that we reported on before a lot of American news did, actually, because it later came through an entire cycle with the Wall Street Journal and New York Times reporting on the same thing, of that Germany had pulled together an investigation saying Ukrainian nationals rented a sailing ship, basically a small yacht, and went trolling around the Baltics and planted these, and then got away with it.
In a environment that was tremendously turbulent seas, with perhaps inexperienced divers in a small boat going very, very deep.
Yes.
To plant
just a
very
few,
complex
just
munitions.
A few drunken sailers.
That's actually how they covered it. Like one drunk night, and they were like, "Hey guys," it was the Neo Bros situation. Like, "Hey guys, what if we just blow these things up?" It's like, "Oh, all right."
We just happen to be right above this pipeline that's 200 meters deep.
I got all this C4. You guys want to fuck around with it?
Okay. All right, so now it brings us to here.
Yes. And what was revealed this week would actually happen in late September, but then didn't get around to the American media till just this week, was a guy named John Anchor Nelson, is the harbor master of Christians Island. He 4 or 5 days before the election saw
explosion.
Did I say election? No,
yes.
Geez. Yep. Before the explosion, saw vessels off the island that didn't have transponders on, and believed these vessels were a rescue mission. So he sent out their assets and rescue missions out to them to communicate with them via short-range radio, and discovered that they were U.S. Navy vessels, who then told them to get the hell out of there. And then they did.
Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
So, a lot of questions there. It's a long article, and it details out all the stuff that we just summarized, and does a brief, conversation with this guy and summarizes it quickly. Let me actually bring that part up.
I also want to remind people that we were talking about it because this is when we went viral in Sweden. We were talking about Sweden investigating it.
Yes, and then pulling out.
Right around the time that they joined NATO, which was March 7th of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So again,
they stopped their investigation because they got invited to join the Cool Kids Club.
Yeah.
Right.
Allegedly.
And that was actually reported by Swedish people too. That wasn't our theory. We just discovered the theory. That's a very interesting theory.
Yeah. But our clip went viral in Sweden.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Swedes. Appreciate you.
I love you guys.
Yeah. Here's the fella right here. Right. And what's so interesting here is how it cuts across both predominant theories. So there's a kind of a catch-22 we're sitting at. And I actually sent an email to the reporter. Hopefully we can arrange an interview, because I think it'd be a really interesting guy to talk to. Because he's talked to this guy. He sat down and interviewed him. And trying to get into some of the details here. But so Hirsch's story, to review real quick, was that there was the Navy used to recover Baltrops 22, which is a NATO annual exercise in the Baltics for coordinating a response from a Russian attack. Or Russian control over the Baltics to try to repel or advance control of it. That was done in June 5th to the 17th of that year. So Nelson's testimony says it was 4 or 5 days prior to the explosions, which was September 26th.
So these boats were in the Baltics, not during the Baltrops exercises, but much later in the year.
Yes.
Interesting. So their cover story is a little bit blown by this revelation.
Well, I mean, this would mean this... It's two options, right? They planned to burn Baltrops, and this was to monitor their planting before the explosion. That's very possible, right?
Sure.
These Navy vessels would have the ability to look at the floor of the sea and know what's going on, right? That's how they detect mines. That's how they detect submarines. Our advanced, radar under there is all patented, secret, super secret stuff, right? So the theory could be that these were to review the work done by these Navy divers, make sure it was still in place so that they could explode it a few days later. Possible. Second to that, it complicates the Andromeda story, because what that means is the Andromeda people were there sailing around U.S. Navy ships, because they planted at exactly the same time that this guy noticed these Navy vessels sitting around the area. Now, it could be off by a few days. His memory isn't perfect on this, right? He just saw a thing one time. And we don't really know the full extent of the Andromeda story. It has been remodeled by reporters. Like, they literally rented the Andromeda and sailed to all the places they think they sailed to, where there's evidence trailing that. And if you want detail on the Andromeda story, we did do a full coverage of it. We explained the entire story. So it suggests, and then lastly about that, it does suggest that the open source debunking of Hirsch's reporting is absolute bullshit, because almost all the debunking that happened in response to Seymour Hirsch's initial story was all based upon transponder data. And what this guy's saying is these guys didn't have transponder data on. So Seymour said two things. One, they can turn it off. Two, they can manipulate the public data, because that's all hosted by the Navy in the first place.
Of course it is.
So his case is that, you got the NSA who can do what the NSA does. Of course, they can manipulate publicly available data sets if they need to, in order to cover up probably the most important covert ops of the last 10 years.
Oh yeah.
So that's really, as I see it, what this does. It complicates both stories. It doesn't give us anything beyond better evidence that perhaps America was involved in either sponsoring the Andromeda thing, right? Because this is literally happening when we know Russia moves to this territory, right? With naval ships and submarines and shit.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
There's a war going on, which we are funding a proxy war in Russia at the exact same time. At this time frame that we're talking about, America is approving more and more weapons and talking about doing things like tanks and airplanes and shit. And there's substantial amounts of like, if you funded if your CIA is informing everything that is going on the ground, according to the New York Times, to pick targets and to do all this stuff, coordinating the war effort in the Ukraine, but doesn't know that the Ukrainian efforts are to blow up these pipelines, which is part of what we understand as the core story. So like Mike Benz's thesis, right? That's the last part of this that hasn't gone as mainstream as these other narratives. Mike Benz, just to remind you, is a former Trump high-level White House cybersecurity and professional, right? In cybersecurity and national security.
And he's worked at the State Department as well.
Yes. Yeah. He now is a huge pillar of the pro-free speech on the internet regime, right? And he's gone super viral since, we last covered him. He was on like Sean Ryan show and Tucker Carlson and all that kind of stuff. His theory is that...
He hasn't gone big time until he's been on our show.
Yeah, right. That's right. Is that Burisma, right? Burisma is the natural gas company in Ukraine, was being orchestrated to go private from being a publicly owned gas company. The effort by the intelligence services using Hunter Biden at the time as an asset was to shepherd that, Hunter Biden being a government liaison, into the hands of a Western-controlled company, right? Be that Exxon or someone else, right? BP, whatever.
Sure.
Someone in the sphere of the Western's control of influence, so that then they could reap the benefits of the natural gas sales, not to mention the national security implications of Burisma, right? Maidan, and that was the 2014 coup d'etat in Ukraine, was to keep it out of Russian hands so that it could continue its pathway to going into private Western hands. The war basically when that wasn't completely successful and the Donbass split away, was kind of set us on the path to this eventual war where you are now destroying all Russian infrastructure connections to Europe. There's still some exist, right? I have a Reuters story here about the challenges of trying to shut off Russian gas going to Hungary and other states that are still reliant on Russian gas, even as they, obviously aren't a huge fan of the invasion. But they can, we've covered some of this before, that there's a tremendous amount of pressure on these companies to try to get their natural gas from someplace else, even though it's more expensive than Russian gas. That's why they don't I can't remember Hungary's president and all that kind of jazz. That's not important.
Viktor Orban, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So U.S. corporations, and then I have this as evidence of this kind of CIA effort, and we can see this in Ukraine now. U.S. corporations cash in on Ukraine's oil and gas. As Ukraine sells off public assets and privatization spree, U.S. fossil fuel corporations like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Halliburton are in talks to run its oil and gas industry. And the IMF is imposing the Washington Consensus.
Can't imagine why Cheney's endorsing Kamala.
Oh, interesting.
Oh.
Where would that happen?
Oh, an interesting link.
So the Mike Benz thesis is, okay, so it makes sense. It is a tremendous, if you see the big picture of how the blob would see Ukraine as part of the geostrategic chessboard, the United States blowing up the Nord Stream makes total sense, because you isolate Russia as the what did Obama call it, a gas station with an army.
Yeah. With nukes.
And nukes. Okay, so if that's how you're looking at it, then you say, well, it makes total sense for the U.S. to sponsor, either Ukrainians do it, and then you can blame it on Ukraine, which that makes a lot of sense. Sure. Or for them to do it with U.S. Navy divers, and then set up the Ukrainians as a patsy.
But either way, it's really the U.S. doing it.
Well, and part of what's interesting about this article too is that he does a great job of explaining why Germans don't seem that upset about it, right? Even as they're paying higher gas prices and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like if your sister was hooked on drugs, right, and you took the drugs away, right? You're kind of like, well, thank God you took the drugs away, right? Because
Sure.
the drugs are this terrible person called
then
Putin.
she
Right?
also has withdrawal and is probably upset at first.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Right.
overall, it's better.
Right. If that's the way you look at it, then you can sympathize and understand how the Germans might be feeling about this action, either by Ukrainians doing it or by America. Like, it doesn't really matter to them at that point. Right?
They're
They
like,
go off
well,
the
we
drugs.
really can't oppose it because America kind of funds a lot for us. So
Yeah.
maybe we
Yeah.
just got to like
I don't know.
grin and bear it.
I don't know if I'm like, are they just not? Do they just not know Germans? Like, I mean, maybe the German politics now, but like, do the people of Germany? You think they wouldn't like be kind of pissed?
Well, I mean, in my understanding
would be.
is the Andromeda story is the predominant narrative across Europe. Like, that is taking up all the reporting time. The Seymour is more of an American phenomenon.
That's kind of where I lean. Like, I also don't think the Ukrainians are doing it without our
They can't.
consent.
They certainly can't.
It would be crazy if so, because you can't overestimate just how interwoven with their structures our intelligence services are and our military is at this point.
Yeah.
So given all that, how could they have pulled this off without that? Especially given that there are Navy vessels right on top of them when they're planning the charges, according to this eyewitness, it seems, right?
Oh, yeah.
If not, they're days next to it.
Yeah.
If not that, if you're a Navy vessel, the range of your radar and capability to see a dinghy floating out there doing their thing is very high, right? And you would want to know that because you're in a fucking war right now, right? So very interesting set of phenomena that shouldn't be ignored.
I sent you a picture on Discord to pull up.
Oh, okay.
Just to show where this island is compared to like where the pipeline blew up. For our viewers. So right below Stream 1, that little that's the island.
Right.
That's Christensen Island.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then here's
I
the
also don't
explosions.
know if that's what it's actually called. I think we're maybe mispronouncing it, but
We're just westernizing it. It's
Yeah,
fine.
we're doing the best we can, guys.
But,
so potentially within line of sight of the island. I mean, it
that's
does
probably
look fairly
pretty
far.
far still, but like obviously if they're getting radar, or how did they see?
It wasn't clear. It wasn't
Okay.
clear that
Did
they
just
detected somehow, and he
Okay.
sent boats out. That's all we really know. And I that's actually one of the questions I want to ask is like, how'd they detect it? What was the actual process?
Yeah.
You know, all those. That's where all the juice is at, right? Because that tells you so much about what's going on. It wasn't a stealth ship then. Or
Yeah.
some
Well,
kind
I
of,
have to imagine, like, right, because I mean the pipeline goes pretty close.
Yeah.
So I
Like, you
have
talking
to
about this
imagine
one?
that
Nordstream one?
if ships are there, I have to imagine that's within eyes. Like you can see that
Right,
probably.
yeah. Oh, you mean this closest
Close
area
to the
here?
island.
Yeah.
Which would make sense why you wouldn't want to plant the charges there.
Yeah. So then they're like, oh shit, we're blown. Let's go to.
I see what you mean. Like
Yeah.
he encounters them there, and yeah, that'd be a good question. Where did he encounter
Yeah,
them?
yeah.
And it seems like the harbor master, given his experience, would be able to tell you exactly where the ships were sitting at, because that would tell you a tremendous amount about the opportunity for them to be there as monitoring of the already planted charges from Baltrops 22.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
All right. Yeah. All right. So
The
we're
plot
going
thickens.
long. And so maybe we won't go as much into the UFO stuff as we're talking about. I just wanted to highlight a little bit on this because it is a very interesting
secret program.
Yes. So what was released this week from Public is...
Thank you, Schellenberger.
Yes, thank you, Schellenberger. Yeah. So the a program name. Okay, so real quick, the speed run of the background is this. For a very long time, there's always been a bifurcation between UFO and unidentified aerial phenomena research, like public disclosure research saying, here's what it is. It's actually a weather balloon or whatever. And like the cover of that, or like the behind the scenes research, which is like DARPA, Skunkworks, things like that, that are either using the outward facing communications to cover for programs or to do something else. Right. And basically what happened is 2022 ARROW started. That's the government effort by Congress telling the executive branch, you're going to study this and then you're going to release it a public report. 2023, David Grush comes out, whistleblows, goes public. In the congressional testimony, he says they have non-human craft, and non-intelligent bodies, right? Or non-human intelligence bodies. Public sources confirm this with basically the Inspector General concludes that Grush's claims of a cover-up to keep this information from Congress, not the actual bodies, not the craft itself, but the cover-up themselves to prevent this is credible and urgent. Okay. Additional disclosure amendment fails in the 2024 NDAA. We talked about it when it was coming up. And this would have required more clarity to Congress about what's going on with these programs. This same committee that was kind of formed in order to actually handle all this stuff was denied access to these facilities, denied access even in SCIFs to a lot of this information. So they're obviously causing ruckus and advocating for this bill in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2024 to change the whole thing. Early 2024, this year, Arrow releases their final report. And then the guy quits.
From Arrow?
Yeah, from the government, right? He retires.
Wow.
The claim is that...
Mic drop. Basically,
what his claim is that a small cabal of intel and military personnel are keeping the UFO conspiracy accusation alive because of a lack of religious attachment to it. He does a debunk of a series of UAP phenomena, but ignores the most consequential ones, and some of it writes off very clumsily. Like, he literally says the Tic Tac was like a weather balloon, which just completely violates all of the testimony of these people, and you have to completely disprove the testimony and just look at the video evidence. Additionally, that there's some really clear stuff. Like he literally goes like, "Oh, there's this secret program that everyone talks about. Well, I went and I talked to those people, and they said there's no secret program, so therefore there's no secret program."
Close the case, guys. Close it.
It's like,
appreciate your service.
One of the articles says it's akin to asking a mob boss if he's engaging in illegal activity and subsequently being satisfied with a no.
Yeah.
So what happened here is, in the course of this reporting, public has gotten access to some unnamed anonymous sources within the State Department who are confirming and denying various different components of this. One of the things that happened this week was one of those sources gave public access to some documents using the Human Intel system, reporting system within the Pentagon. Now, so this isn't the public one, which is Arrow. This is the government insider side of investigating unidentified aerial phenomena, and specifically the Project Immaculate Constellation, which has been a project that was been accused of before of existing but unconfirmed. Now public has seen it on actual documentation, including two different pieces that I wanted to talk about. And this is a good photo of the sphere.
Is this the Baghdad airbase sphere?
I think this is actually a different one. What does it say underneath there? I can't.
It doesn't say where it is.
Mosul or over Iraq. Yeah,
this is right. Yeah,
Mosul, not
Mosul.
Baghdad.
Yeah, right. But we actually showed this video when we were going over this before. So the Human Intel system is a reporting system within the government for reporting this phenomena, but that isn't public. And what they got access to is, quote, a significant volume of intelligence reports documenting firsthand encounters with unidentified and anomalous phenomena or unidentified flying objects by DoD personnel exists within Defense Human Int,
intelligence,
HUMINT, or human intelligence databases accessible to the intelligence community. So that's a claim, meaning that if you're in the intelligence community, you can get access to Human Int, you can get access to these UAP stuff, but Congress can't. The one UAP maneuvered in proximity of less than 12 meters in the area directly starboard of a cockpit. There, the UAP established a rigid spatial relationship with the F-22, maintaining its exact position and orientation parallel with the F-22's cockpit, despite multiple evasive rolls and maneuvers. So think of an F-22 rolling through the area, yet this is maintaining a consistent relationship with it. Surrounded by the presumed hostile UAPs, the F-22s were forced out of the mission area under the escort of a UAP formation. So demonstrating intelligence, demonstrating area control, demonstrating capability of maneuverability, that's incredible.
And this is information that's come out of the Immaculate Constellation revelations.
Yeah, well, and it looks relatively limited from the Substack article, right? They got access to one guy who gave them access to some stuff that's behind the scenes. That's really what happened here. My point here is that the Arrow effort tried to conclude with a period, And a lot of this still leaves a lot to be explained. And additionally that there is currently an NDAA for 2025 that has yet to be voted on. So there's going to probably be, I predict, another effort to try to inject more UAP disclosure into that discussion, which will probably be shut down by the intelligence committee's heads. Like the people who are in charge of that committee are trying to shut it down. So that's a fight that's going to be coming up.
So like the Gang of Eight, or is it? Am I mixed?
That's the congressional side of the Gang of Eight.
Okay.
So the Gang of Eight also includes the Speaker of the House, President of the Senate, the minority leader of the House, and minority leader of the Senate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think that under a Trump administration has he what?
No, as you guys, I'm just fucking around.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Do you think that under a Trump administration has he said anything that he would disclose UAP stuff?
Yeah, so I mean,
Well,
at
he
least
created Space Force.
So he obviously knows something's going on.
It's at least more likely because he is far more public about it than any presidential candidate, pretty much ever.
I believe it was one of the Paul brothers, that interview where they asked him about aliens and he said, I think there's something, but I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, we did the other one too, like, Tom Cruise, very handsome guy. These other guys coming just like Tom Cruise to tell me all about it. And he's saying,
beautiful men.
I have access, he said, and I speak to people about it. And I've had actual meetings on it, and they will tell you there's something going on, right? So his willingness to talk about it is one of the huge parts, one of the huge benefits of it, at least in perhaps empowering Congress to get more out of it. Now, will he burn political capital on it? No, I don't think so. He's got way bigger priorities in other areas. That said, openness to it, I think, is critical in order to drive public accountability and public pressure to it. If a senator goes back to his home state and someone says, hey, what about UAPs? They're more likely to actually give a shit about it than if no one talks about it or cares about it.
I feel like it should be part of his immigration policy. It's sort of a border.
That's true. It's just like, build a wall, baby. Build a bubble.
Build a dome.
There you go. So that was a quick run. I wanted to dig a little deeper, but we don't got time. So,
well, I'm sure there'll be more coming out here as Schellenberger digs deeper into this because I can't.
For sure.
He's so thorough. I can only imagine there'll be more to come.
For sure.
Fantastic. Well, that's been a great episode, and we appreciate you for watching. David, thank you. Bennett, thank you. Kyle, happy Canadian Thanksgiving. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for watching. Be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, follow wherever it is that you're listening to this. We really appreciate your support. We'll see you next time.
We're going to the skiff, so if you want more,
become a member.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to become a member and support the show financially, check out humanreactionpod.com. And remember,
we take foxes, right? We're going to paint them orange. We're going to release them in the wild. It'll freak them out, I'm telling you.